serious Redditors who chose to speak now instead of forever hold your peace at a wedding, why did you speak up? And how did it turn out? Story 1. I knew for a fact the bride had cheated on the groom while they were engaged, about 3 months previous. My speaking up ruined a few friendships, had several people from the bride's family try to assault me, and ended my friendship with the groom. He later confided that he appreciated me speaking up, but hated me for not doing it sooner, and said it hurt too much to be around me after that. Edit. Thank you so much, kind stranger, for the gold. I'll pay it forward. Also, if I did not reply, I am sorry. I checked back in yesterday to find my inbox in the triple digits. I tried to go through all of them. Story 2. I got really drunk at my mother's wedding to a guy she'd known for 9 months who was really in. There was no speak now moment, but during the pre-ceremony mingling, I was loudly expressing how much of a I thought her fiancé was, and she overheard me. The conversation went something like, I had no idea you felt that way. I think we all do. He honestly is a reel of a man. I kept overusing the word, while others around the place better articulated my sentiment, and the general opinion was that yes, he was an utter. The wedding was called off, he left, mother got extremely drunk, and we all showed up to the wake reception anyway, for a night of dancing, while the staff stood around awkwardly. We look back on it as one of the best things that has ever happened, and she's with a really nice guy now. Her ex collapsed one day, and it turns out he has a hole in his heart, and he refuses to stop being obese, so he'll be dead or in and out of hospital soon anyway. Dodged a bullet there. Story 3. Not during the ceremony, but while getting ready for my best friend's wedding. He and his fiancée had been together 2 months when they decided to get married, but got married on the 1-year anniversary of meeting. He'd never been in a good relationship, and was one of those, she's the best thing to ever happen to me, and then, she's a horrible troll, I don't know what I was thinking, kind of guy. So while getting dressed, he said, I'm really nervous. Does anyone have anything to say? And my response was, I don't think this is a good idea, but I know you want what you want. If this is what you want, I'm 100% behind you. His dad was sitting on the other side of my friend and just leaned into my view and gave me a thumbs up and a thank you smile. My buddy looked at me and said, this is it. She's the one. They've been married more than a decade, have an awesome little girl. He married that woman and turned a corner I didn't know was there. I don't know how she did it, but she made him the man he was born to be, and I've repeatedly thanked her for it, and reiterate that I'm glad he ignored me. I do this yearly. Story 4. True story. My father has been married 5 times, and at the last wedding, it happened. Twice. July 7th, 2007, the family and friends began to gather, all of us taking turns trying to talk him out of marrying the woman he had only met a few months before. But his mind was set. Since the date was so popular and arrangements were made so late, the minister was a used car salesman with a certificate from an online site. The wedding and reception were held in my father's backyard that happened to be right next door to his best friend, which he proves to be that day. I was resigned to my fate of best man that day, my first and only time with that honor, when the ceremony began. My father began with a speech explaining how 2 people could meet and fall in love in such a short time, and that he knew it was hard to believe. And that's when his best friend, just in time from his fishing trip, raised his Tanqueray and tonic to ask, is this the part where we object? 'Cause I'd like to. In all my life, I've never witnessed the mix of relief/shock/humor/horror and all the other emotions this stirred. My sister cried. His friends laughed. Her family cringed. But my sweet grandmother was so stoic, I'll never forget. My father calmly said, no, bud, not yet, and went on. He began to talk about other relationships and people and how he knew this a marriage they would last. And that's when our hero spoke again. How about now? I really need to object to this. The same sentiment was felt throughout, and yet my father replied, no, bud, we're not doing that, and then turned to the minster and said, we should probably skip that part. The ceremony went on, and so did the marriage for about 6 months. Teal Doctor, my dad's best friend, objected at his wedding, and my dad wished he had listened. Story 5. I attended a wedding to do only this about 13 years ago. A friend in college had dated someone who was abusive, verbally and physically. I was aware of this, and the guy kept it going. He was abusive all the way. He was going to get married to a woman we all knew, and I had been told through one of her friends that he had an abuse issue with his new fiancée once, but she forgave him, and that it wasn't a big thing. Knowing that he had abused her too, I showed up at the wedding and pointed out that the guy was a serial abuser, and that if it was my kid, I would not want this wedding to happen. The wedding did not go on. I left hurriedly right after because, let's just say, I didn't feel so safe for bringing it up openly there. I hope she had a fine life afterwards. Edited to clarify something above edit X2. I have no direct contact with her, but she is also a Facebook friend of a friend. And I know she married someone else and has 3 kids, so there is that. Story 6. My older brother had met this girl, and in a whirlwind romance had proposed and asked me to be the best man. He lived in a different city, so they were well into the wedding planning stages when he finally came to visit, and I got to meet his fiancée. When they showed up, my brother was a shadow of the man I once knew. In under a year, he'd dropped about 20 kilograms by joining her on her vegan, gluten-free diet. He was not overweight beforehand. His usual loud, energetic self had been replaced with a quiet, doting man who would do anything to avoid upsetting his wife to be who didn't like loud noises or any crass humor. After a week of hanging out, they went back home and I called up my brother to tell him she was sucking the life force out of him, and I did not think they had a healthy relationship. A week later, he moved out, canceled the wedding, broke up, and was allowed to play video games with me again on the weekends. She hadn't liked the violent games and noises. He's with a wonderful girl now who the whole family loves to bits and has thanked me many times for speaking up when no one else did until after he split. TLDR, I talked my brother out of marrying a succubus so we could play video games on Sunday afternoons again. Story 7. Bride was my best friend. I was MOH. She knew her fiancé from a young age. They had a long-distance relationship. He was in a band, worked at a gas station in LA, and she was in the Navy. She was about to go on a 6-month deployment, so they got engaged. I don't know why. She gets back from deployment and tells me that she cheated on him the whole time. He was planning a trip out to where she was stationed, and I told her she needed to tell him. It wasn't just, she claimed it was a relationship with this other guy for 6 months. Well, during his visit, she only tells him she was drunk and sad one night and kissed someone. But she tells me that the whole truth was told. I offered condolences to the would-be groom, and in that conversation we realize she told us different stories. He went back to her, demanded the truth. They broke up the next day. She and I didn't speak for a while. She ended up telling me the relationship wouldn't have worked anyway. She's happy now, recently married. Edit. When I said we are repairing our friendship, I mean we have spoken once in 5 years. I figured since she's married now I would say congratulations. I did, and she said thank you and a few other pleasantries. Nothing more than that. Story 8. I was the best man at my stepbrother's wedding. While in the back of the church, I let him know that I parked the car directly outside the door where we were. I explained that I didn't think this was a good idea and he barely knew her. I said something like she is probably a complete psycho the way she smiles like that all the time. He agreed, and we opened the door just as her car pulled into the parking lot. He got all nervous and ducked back inside. Years later, she is in a mental institution and stuck with 3 kids, 2 that he's pretty sure are his, and 1 that is slightly darker skin-toned. Story 10. I'm not the one who said it, but I was the bride at a wedding where a friend did. Can I share? At my wedding a few years back, a good friend of mine stood up and told me he'd always been in love with me and begged me to run away with him. My relationship with my fiancé/now husband was fantastic, and I'd never seen my friend as a romantic partner, so there was no way that was happening. I told him I was happy where I was and that I was sorry I couldn't return his feelings, but that's just how it was, to which he threatened to kill himself if he had to watch me marry another man. So I kicked him out. The night my husband and I got back from our honeymoon, this friend called to tell me he'd just swallowed a bunch of pills, and it was my fault. I called the EMTs to save him and have washed my hands of him since. Story 11. I spoke before rather than speaking now, but since this thread has been firebombed, I figure it's close enough. I was an acquaintance of the bride, a friend of a friend kind of situation. I never really liked either the bride or the groom very much, to be honest. She was a next-level mean girl, and he always gave off a bit of a skeezy vibe, always commenting on my appearance and body, and those of the other younger girls that ran with that crowd. I was about 10 years younger than the couple in question. But they were fun enough to hang out with at parties, and I never thought too much about it. Until he came into the bar where I worked and spent the evening aggressively hitting on me and the other waitresses and female bar staff. Again, I wrote it off as typical dickhead behavior, until I left at the end of my shift and interrupted him finger blasting one of my coworkers in the back parking lot. I was super grossed out and yelled, "You're engaged!" before I peeled out and headed home. At the time, I was living with a group of dudes, one of whom had been friends with both the bride and groom since middle school. He was awake when I got home, so I told him what I saw, and was surprised to discover. 1. It wasn't the first time, either with my coworker or with *5 others before her. 2. The bride knew about previous times, and just kept making him promise that this time he wouldn't do it again. And 3. All their friends knew he was cheating again, but figured that she would go ahead with the wedding anyway, so no one had told her, figuring it would just upset her to no effect. I should have taken my friend at his word that telling her was a bad idea that wouldn't accomplish anything, but being a naive 19-year-old who couldn't quite believe anyone would actually get married if they knew their partner was actively cheating, I really struggled with this. After listening to her talk asterisk on and on asterisk about every detail of her fall dream wedding through every spring and summer cottage party and bonfire, I snapped on a camping trip in mid-August about a month before the wedding. I dragged her out for a hangover breakfast and spilled the beans. What I personally saw, what I had heard from others, and what I knew of his history. I ended by saying that if she still wanted to marry him, it was her business, but she deserved to know. We drove back to camp in silence, but as soon as she got out of the car, she immediately started screaming at him in front of the roughly 30 people in the process of packing up tents, etc. They had a 20-minute yelling match, punctuated by frequent well asterisk she asterisk said she asterisk fucking saw you, while pointing at me. It was awful, and the guys I lived with only told me what a dumb idea it had been to talk to her about 30 times on the trip home. 3 days or so after the camping fiasco, we all got an email from her stating that after soul-searching and reflection, she had realized that he loved her, and she had to forgive him, and restating her preference for cash gifts. So, the wedding was still on, and we were all still going. To this day, I'm not sure why I still went, except that most of my friends were going, and they convinced me that I owed it to the bride to show support after my inconvenient truth-telling almost ruined everything. So, I went. But when they got to the smarmy readings about true love and partnership, I just couldn't hang. So before they got to the speak now part, I stood up and walked out. I thought that in a big church it wouldn't be easily noticed. Apparently, a lot of people were expecting asterisk, someone asterisk to say asterisk, something asterisk. So when I got up and left, people definitely noticed in a big way. No one else said anything at the appointed time, though, so the wedding went ahead, and apparently the reception was a real rager. I spent the night drinking alone at home. As for the marriage, he continued to cheat, and based on my stand at the wedding, there were a ton of rumors that I was the one he was cheating with. I got a lot of for it, and lost a lot of friends in that group, although I was starting to realize they were pretty worthless anyway. Then my colleague, she of the parking lot fingerbang, announced she was pregnant, and he admitted to being the father. The married couple divorced, and he and my colleague got married 2 years later. I only stayed close with one member of that group, who tells me that he continues to be a serial cheater who now has 2 kids outside marriage in addition to the 2 he has with his wife. In the end, nothing was gained by my speaking up. It was a naive decision, and one I wouldn't repeat under the same circumstances. Story 12. My dad, just before he walked 19-year-old me down the aisle, whispered in my ear, "You don't have to go through with it, sweetheart." 3 years of abuse and a divorce later, I wish I hadn't. Story 13. Back around 99, when I was a corporal in the Army. One of my troops who was perpetually single, just bashful and bad with girls in general, is just bouncing around the motor pool, comes over and asks if me and the rest of the squad would like to attend his wedding that weekend. Some of the guys laugh, but I do the wait. You had no girl last week and now you're getting married? Yep, they had met over the weekend. He was in love and she was the one, no questions. We tried to talk him out of it all week, got the chaplain and one SG involved, but he was dead set, and there was no longer anything in the regulations requiring enlisted soldiers to get their commander's permission to get married. There used to be. So Sunday rolls around and yes, I go to the wedding. He is there. She has some family there, and though I try to talk to him, he does not want to hear anymore, but thanks me for coming. They get to the part of asking if anyone has any objections, speak now, or forever hold your peace, and I stand up. Her family are all shooting me the death gazes. I don't care, this is my soldier. Despite his pleading stares, he is my soldier and my responsibility. The minister gives me a tentative yes, looking like he has never seen anyone actually do this before. Paraphrasing as best I can, it has been some time since then. They can't get married because I doubt she has been completely honest with him. She is a stripper down at the Big Apple, real place, Fort Stewart, Hinesville, Georgia. She is also a barracks bunny, and I did her about a month ago and know at least 5 other guys she has done. 3 of them at once as a gangbang. She has a cute little scar on her left butt cheek and a birthmark on the outer side of her right breast. They were dang near perfect too, part of why I remember them even today. Will do just about anything but, and apparently loves hanging from the Bradley troop straps while getting nailed. She lives just off X Street by Y Street, about a block from ABC Elementary School, supposedly with her mother. And one last thing private. Do you remember last month when me and our mechanic had to go get shots to cure the fire crotch? I'll make you an appointment this week. You have been banging fire crotch. I'm done, make your own decision. And I sat back down. Her family was a mix of furious and embarrassed, but fortunately, he went from pissed to thinking about it as I spoke, and after a moment looked at me and the guys who had come with me and said he trusted me with his life. He should probably trust me now. And we all walked out and went for beers and to try and find some friendly company. Last I knew, he'd gotten out and married some girl back home in Oregon. Story 14. I did. My friend for 6 years was going to get married to this girl I was dealing heroin to. He had no idea I knew her. And suddenly, half a year later, they were getting married. I decided to speak now. I just didn't want to forever hold my peace, I guess. Story 15. On the day of her wedding, I told my close friend I thought she was totally insane. I pointed out that she'd met the guy 3 months before, when she'd just been dumped by the man she'd been in love with for 6 years, and he'd done nothing but live with her rent-free, jobless, smoking weed every few hours since. That he couldn't hold a job and wasn't that cute and had weird uber-religious parents. I also said, if you do this, you'll never finish college, you know? We were 20 at the time. She thanked me for my opinion and said she was doing it anyway. They've been married now for more than 10 years, have a cute little farmhouse and 1 child. He's an amazing dad and a loyal, loving husband. TLDR, I was wrong. He was Mr. Right. Story 16. My best man, with whom I had been friends since diaper days, told me about 2 weeks before the wedding that he couldn't be part of something he didn't believe would work out. My cousin graciously stepped in for him on short notice. I haven't seen my friend but twice since then. We will be married 40 years this August. I guess he was wrong, eh? Story 17. I'm a wedding photographer, and about 3 years ago I was photographing a wedding in Liverpool in the UK. I highlight this as those people who know Liverpool will know. I started work at 8 a.m. with bride prep. About 6 hours into my day, it was the ceremony after photographing guests, etc. That went by without a hitch. Did the bride and groom photos and heard so many I love yous, and we headed inside where it was the wedding breakfast meal. Then the speeches came. Bride's father gave a brilliant speech. Groom's father was pretty good too. Best man's was a bit awkward and shaky. Then it came to the groom's. He started by thanking everyone for coming and apologized wasting their time. He went on to say how his best man and wife had an affair 6 months previous for a good couple of months, but called it off, blah, blah, blah. Turns out the bride's mom and dad knew and didn't say anything. They paid for all the wedding. So he decided to go through the day, wasting all their money and brides, etc. Him and his best mates minus best man went on the honeymoon to Mexico instead. Was a pretty awkward ordeal. Story 18. Well, if speaking now the day before counts, and for your own wedding, then yes, I did. Ultimately, neither of us were ready for marriage as we were pretty immature in a few key areas of our lives. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, I kept on feeling more and more uneasy. I told my parents and they wanted to make sure it wasn't just nerves. I assured them it wasn't. This was a feeling of pure dread. Fear and hesitation are a good bit different than anxiousness and excitement. I flew in a week early. She lived in a different state. All the while I had the feeling of, you gotta head out of here. It was difficult because I hate disappointing people, but I had to follow my gut. I told her the night before and left. I've had nothing but words of love and support from friends and family. Some people were upset at my choice and execution, but when they heard it from my angle, it was easier for them to understand. My ex and I still talk every now and then. It's been good for both of us. Story 19. I think this is a fun question. I'm a wedding videographer shooting roughly about 26, 35 weddings per year. For the last 6 years, I've been filming this many, and never once have I ever heard this movie. Friendly phrase uttered by the officiant. When I first started, I thought it would be fun to keep a record if anyone spoke up, but that phrase has never been said at any wedding I've filmed. Story 20. This is a story my professor told me, so it's secondhand. True or false, it's still hilarious. When he was in college, he was rooming with a friend, Brian, of his from high school, and that friend's longtime girlfriend, Sue. According to the story, the first date Brian could only afford to take her out for a soda. They shared a can of Dr. Pepper. This formed the basis of Brian and Sue's relationship. They had Dr. Pepper posters, a wall clock, even T-shirts that said, "He's a pepper," and "She's a pepper," respectively. One day, my professor was at the apartment and looking for something to drink. He asked Sue for a soda. She went to her closet, moved a pile of clothes, and revealed a hidden stash of Sprite. My professor was confused by the clandestine nature of the Sprite, so he asked. Apparently, Sue hated Dr. Pepper but didn't want to upset Brian. My professor thought it was weird, but whatever. Later, he and Brian went out to drink. They had been drinking for a bit, and my prof said, "Let's get some flaming Dr. Peppers." Brian would have none of it, he confessed. I fucking hate Dr. Pepper. Flash forward a few months, the three of them go out for pizza. Obviously, both Brian and Sue ordered Dr. Pepper to drink. My professor drops the bomb. He's like, Sue, Brian hates Dr. Pepper. Brian Sue hates Dr. Pepper. Discuss. According to him, the silence was the most awkward thing he'd ever experienced. Brian and Sue broke up 2 weeks after the Dr. Pepper incident. My professor felt bad, but as time went on, Brian got married 5 times, so nowadays, he doesn't feel too bad about the situation. Story 21. My sister got married. Yesterday. They had only been dating a couple of months, but had known each other for years, apparently. I'm helping her get ready before the ceremony, and we're finally alone. I flat out told me sister, Sis, I love you, and if you're happy and I'm happy for you. But my car is parked right out these doors and we can leave right now. She laughed it off and went through with the wedding. Not sure how it'll turn out, but I said my piece. Story 22. Not sure if this is brought up elsewhere, but if anyone knows any reason these two shouldn't be married, speak now or forever hold your peace, was never intended to be, if you don't like them as a couple, say something now. It was actually meant that if there are reasons they shouldn't like, legal reasons to speak up. It's only in the modern era that we use it as a because she's a mate kind of way. Story 23. My aunt died suddenly of cancer, within 2 weeks of diagnosis. She told my uncle decades ago that if anything were to happen to her, that he should marry her best friend. Well, by the time she died, she no longer had connections with her best friend. My uncle found her online in a widowed panic and threatened to marry her to uphold my aunt's long-expired wishes. This lady who was her best friend was in prison for years and had just gotten out for attempted murder of her ex-husband. He tried to hide this information, but once it got out, everybody freaked out and tried to get him to not marry her. Unfortunately, the more people protested, the more he was willing to do it. So, he married an attempted murderer with a gambling addiction, and now his nice big house and valuables are going to go to her because he's so angry at his kids and family for protesting their marriage that he changed his will. Story 24. I'm internet ordained, and the first wedding I performed, I was made aware that the bratty 12-year-old daughter of the bride was planning on objecting. So I skipped that part of the ceremony. Marriage only lasted 3 years. The bride determined she wanted to live with another lady. Story 25. My mom got remarried a few years back to a guy she had only known a couple months. He was the brother of a member of her local church ward. They lived about 1,500 miles apart, so they had no experience living together or dealing with each other day to day. They had the wedding in Vegas at a hotel on the Strip. Both families had been critical of the proposal, especially myself, but my concerns went unheeded. I didn't say anything during the ceremony. Can't honestly remember if the minister asked for objections. But as a U on the way from the chapel to the reception in the ballroom, I did a cannonball into the pool in full tux, soaking them both. Lots of yelling and scolding ensued, and while it was an immature move, I was 22 at the time, I simply said it made a hell of a lot more sense than what they were doing. Well, fast forward about a month and marriage annulled. Surprisingly, they had many issues that would have been easily identified if they had actually really known each other. Oh, and I brought my suitcase down from my room and packed all the booze they had left over from the reception into it, telling the new couple they would need it later. Story 26. Close. I was the best man for my best friend in college. He was marrying his crazy girlfriend because of family pressures. We were at a very swank place in Dallas, where the wedding was about to take place, smoking a joint to take off the edge before the wedding. I was trying to get him to jump in the car with me to take off and blow off the event that would ruin his life. I had almost talked him out of it. Unfortunately, he was mic'd up because the bride's family wanted a video of the whole thing. The photographer-videographer came running up the stairs to tell him he couldn't leave because all of the effort that had gone into the big production his wedding had turned into. He wound up marrying girlfriend. 1 kid, and 2 years later, they had a very messy divorce. A little more weed, and I probably could have saved him a lot of money. Story 27. This is something I plan on doing in the coming weeks. Last year, I discovered that an engaged man was having an affair with my wife. I recently found out his upcoming wedding is being held at a pavilion in a public park. I plan on ruining his wedding by exposing his affair. Story 28. Not exactly at the wedding, but the day of. A friend of mine and former roommate had been dating a girl with a kid right after he got back from the military for only about 6 months when she dropped the "when will we get married" bomb. Her sister, who I had been involved with, had told me in private about the older sister's past, and it confirmed the suspicions some of us had about her wanting to get married ASAP. She wasn't really in love with our friend, but wanted the security and benefits he could provide as well as having a father for her child. We stayed quiet while they were dating because she made him happy, and that is what we cared about. When the wedding finally rolled around, I couldn't keep quiet. I pulled him aside, told him what I knew, and that she wasn't really in love and was just using him. We fought, he decked me hard and told me not to come to the ceremony. No one else said anything to him. We stopped talking after that. Fast forward a year later, they got divorced as she was cheating on him with the baby's father. I got a call from him around midnight one night asking me to go out to the bar for a drink. He ended up apologizing and thanking me for my honesty. Apparently, other friends had ended up coming out of the woodwork after they were married, telling him she was using him. She had also made an effort to isolate him as much as possible, deleting their numbers from his phone, talking for him, etc. It wasn't until he found she was cheating on him and realized that he had no friends left to talk to that things had gone to. We still don't talk as much as we used to, but he's doing better now and gotten in touch with most of his old friends. TLDR. Listen to your friends and family so you don't marry a psychotic manipulator. Story 29. I never made it to the actual wedding, but here's my story anyways. Shortly after her 16th birthday, my cousin had. This wouldn't really have been a big deal, except that side of my family are Jehovah's Witnesses. She was baptized, and so was he, so this is a big no-no. Rather than be outcasted from the family and the congregation, they decided to get hitched. I was the only person who spoke up. I told everyone they were making a mistake by going through with it, that she has her whole life to make it up to God and she doesn't need to be trapped in a marriage to do it. Weeks I begged with my family and her. The worst part is sometimes I would get through to them and they agree with me, and then all of a sudden their religious justifications would kick in and they'd do a complete 180. When my invitation, via Facebook, total shotgun wedding style, came and I declined, my cousin started calling me several times a day to come. I told her I couldn't. I didn't believe anything about this situation was right, and I wished her all best for her life. I haven't talked to her since. My relationship with my parenta has been highly strained, since it was my mother who paid for the wedding and my father who gave her away. My cousin's father was against the wedding too, despite the fact he was the one who insisted they had to get marriage in the beginning and force this whole thing into motion. I don't regret what I did. I think my family is full of idiots. I feel sorry for all of them, especially her kid. No, she wasn't pregnant before the wedding. It's been a few years now. Told her Joho cousin had at 16 and was bullied by her religion to get married. I was the only one to verbally protest. Didn't work. She's married and has a baby now at 17. Woo! Story 30. I did. She came onto me hardcore 2 nights before the wedding. She had a cute little mole mark thing above her, so the groom knew I was legit. He wasn't mad at me because I was like, I didn't do anything. I told her no, and that I was ashamed for her. And she ran out crying from the wedding. Don't marry a yo. Story 31. If I ever get married, I want everyone to stand up at that time and pitch their best arguments. Everyone. If one of us doesn't bail after that kind of grilling, then IMO, it's good to go. Every wedding should be like that. Story 32. Not exactly the same thing, but I stopped talking to my mom when she told me she was getting remarried to a guy 20 years younger than her who she'd known only 4 months, and refused to attend her wedding. Sometimes silence is the best objection. And yes, of course, they're totally divorced. Asterisk and asterisk bankrupt. Beautiful. Story 33. We chose a silent form of protest by having all of the women wear black to the wedding. My mom didn't get the memo and showed up in a bright red dress. The pictures are magical. Story 34. I have a close friend who came from a pretty conservative family, quite strong with their Christian beliefs. Her parents married pretty young and had 4 girls. Anyway, junior high through high school, my friend had a crush on this guy who was also a good friend of ours. But he thought he was a thug and thinks he's a blood or something. He's from Chicago originally, but lived somewhere else pretty much his whole life. Nice guy, but makes a lot of dumb choices. She ended getting into a relationship with him, ended up losing her virginity to him right after high school, and things were just gravy. It was her first serious relationship. Fast forward a few years. Relationship is on the rocks. He treats her like she's talking about marriage and kids. I told her, I think you need to reevaluate this whole situation. It's not a good choice. He doesn't respect you, and I don't see him ever being good for you. I said on several occasions that even though him and I grew up together, we all grew up together. And he was a nice guy. He made stupid choices that she just didn't want to be involved in. The sad part is, out of our little group of friends, I was the only one who stepped up and said something and was honest. She even mentioned that. And we fast forward. I help move her to her sister's in another state. He comes to visit. She gets pregnant. She ends up dragging out this broken relationship for years, ends up having 4 kids with this idiot. I am still telling her every time that she needs to end it. They end up getting married. Her parents wanted it initially. Their relationship goes bad. He moves back to Chicago. She follows him. He cheats on her and knocks up some other ogre-looking chick. They move back, sort out their differences, then he goes to visit family in Chicago, knocks this chick up again, and my friend and him are still married. She claims the relationship is now over, but I haven't heard anything about the marriage. I feel like because of her family's religious background and structure, she won't divorce him. She is a beautiful girl and is truly a smart girl, but I think she became so wrapped up in this relationship from the get-go and felt like because her sisters married their high school sweethearts, that her parents married as high school sweethearts, that this relationship was it, and she would make it work no matter what happened. She didn't deserve what he did to her. She could find a way better man and have a fantastic relationship, but now she is 27, has 4 kids, and doesn't even try to meet new people.